Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. Welcome, everyone. Yes, here we are. We are live. So I'm just gonna wait for a few minutes to get first, I'm going to check the sound if it's working perfectly well. Can you just tell me if it works well? Uh, and then from that, we can wait just a few moments that people join these sessions, then we can get started. So I'm just gonna check on my end. Da-da-da-da. All right, that's perfect. Okay, so we are live. That's perfect. So my screen is shared. I can see myself, and normally you can hear myself. Just if you can confirm in the chat, that will be perfect. Okay. All right. Super. Thank you. Yeah, I have almost like no feedback from what I'm saying, so that's why I'm asking. Okay, we can get started probably like in just like a few seconds. Hey, Wally, it's good. Thank you. Thank you for confirming that you can hear myself. That's perfect. All right. Okay, guys. So maybe we can get started, and people that will join they just can watch the record if they join later. So I will publish the record after these sessions on YouTube. So it will be available to everyone. So just quickly before we get started, I'm Romaric, CEO and co-founder of Qovery. I will just explain quickly what's Qovery, but not taking too much time like talking about that because I want to cover during that session. So like the difference between like a static environments and ephemeral environments. So showing you, like concretely speaking, how ephemeral environments work, what is like an ephemeral environment, how does it compare to a static environment like the staging one. Staging is a very well-known environment, and I want to cover all of that during that session, and I want also to make it like as much as possible interactive. So if you have any question, I already received some questions that are like very, very good questions. I will try to respond to all of them, but if you have any of them, just like feel free to drop your question, and I will be like super happy just to respond to all of that. Okay. So quickly, the agenda of the day. So we have 1 hour together, maybe a bit less, maybe a bit more. So depending on the number of questions that I receive. But basically, what I want to cover is, as I said, like introducing the subject, like quickly, like the pros and the cons of ephemeral environments. I want to make sure also that we are all at the same page. So like concerning what's a static environment, how does that difference set from like an ephemeral environment, dynamic environment. I will share like some feedback like on some implementations that we made. So from our customers, our users, what they're doing with like ephemeral environments. I will make a demo, like a quick demo. So not so quick, but detailed demo, I would say. It's much more like precise of like ephemeral environments. So we'll play it together. So it's much more interesting than just talking about the subject. And we'll conclude and just share also like some pitfalls, some stuff like to avoid just when you get started with the ephemeral environment. Okay, so that's the idea. All right, so let's go. And just like before getting into that subject, I want to just mention that point. Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you. You're right. You're completely right. Thank you, Walid. Yes. So something that I want just to make sure that we are all on the same page is like the nomenclature itself. Ephemeral environment is known also as preview environments, dynamic environments. You might have found like those terms as well. You even have like some from other platforms like Deploy, Preview, Review Apps from HeroQ. All of them actually talk about the same subject. That is basically how we can just spin up an environment at any point of time. So, and I will explain what's an environment, what is inside an environment, what's not an environment. But basically, it's all the same, like an ephemeral environment, preview environment, dynamic environment. If you see like those terms like around, they are quite new terms. They are like in place for a long time, but no one has really there is no consortium from like all the players in that space that they are like using the same nomenclature. So it really depends. Ephemeral environment is one of the most used actually, and it really describes in some way the way that it works, because ephemeral environment is like just you can spin up that environment, and at any point of time you can just tear down that environment. So yeah, if you see those elements, so just don't be confused. They are all the same at the end. I've made some distinction between the three first, like ephemeral environment, preview environment, and dynamic environment. Those ones, they are like they are provided. So, and that's the main difference with the two other, like the Deploy, Preview, and Review apps. They are much more older than the new ones. The new ones really support multiple services. Like you can really deploy inside an environment. You can really create like complete environments that looks like your production or your staging with multiple services like a backend, front-end databases, and they work really all together, which is not the same with other platforms that they are focusing maybe just on the front-end part. For instance, Versa and Netlify, they do provide like what they call Deploy Preview, but it works well with just static assets and front-end applications. And Review Apps from HeroQ, since HeroQ doesn't include the concept of environment, so it's just a project, and inside a project you have one single application with different stage, but it's just one single application with different add-ons. You only have like these features, so it's the Review Apps only with one backend or one frontend depending on your applications, and the associated add-ons basically. Okay, but they are all the same. It's very important just to keep that in mind. Okay, at the end of the day. So for us, we really focus on the ephemeral environments, preview environments, dynamic environments. So like the complete environment. And this is like exactly what I wanted to just say. So an environment for us is really a bunch of, and I want just to make sure that we are again all aligned, but an environment, it's a bunch of components of services that are working all together. Okay, so you might probably know already those famous environments: the production, staging, development environments. So they are static environments composed of multiple services. Okay. So for the ones that don't know about just only the production, the staging, so it's an environment that must reflect as much as possible the production. So in the release process, when you're working on an applications and you are delivering a feature, you might want to test and try out that feature to make sure that it works well before releasing it in production. So you don't want to make it breaking the production. So deploying that feature on the staging environment is necessary, and that's why most of companies that are a bit serious, they have at least one staging environment where they can just pre-release and test and try out that feature before releasing in production. Okay. Something that is much more optional, it really depends on the company. You have like the development environment. The development environment is an environment that is with lower capacity, just to make sure that the costs are reduced at the minimum. But that environment is where it's kind of a playground environment where developers, they can just play around with their applications. The features, they can just like also deploy those things and they can try those features externally, or even give access to those features to external users. Most of the time, when you give access to features that you are working on to external user, it's what we call a UAT environment, but we'll not talk about that because it's quite similar in some way to the staging environment. Okay. So that's basically the way that all of that works. I'm pretty sure you're already familiar with all of that, but I just wanted to make sure that it's the case. Okay, so we can move on. So just before getting started into the and jumping into right away into the ephemeral environment, I want just to explain something. Say, why are we talking about ephemeral environment? Why does that make sense today? Like talking about that, and it's really linked to the way that people use the staging environment most of the time. You might be familiar. So if you are like a software developer, so most of the time when you release a new feature, you have to deploy first in staging just to try out that feature, making sure that it's like working properly in the global environment that looks like as much as possible at the production. But the problem is when you start to have like your team that is growing, you have multiple developers working on the same environment. And when something goes wrong, then this environment can be just down, like down for any reason, like someone has broken that environment. Let's say that Jason has like released new features that he was working on, and that features like break just that environment for many reasons. Let's say that Jason like has released a new schema for the database. So the backend application he was working on a new feature. Let's say it's a billing feature. That billing features required just to change the schema. That schema like a change, but at the same time you had like someone else that were working also like on that database, on that applications, and the schema is in the older versions, and then you have like an outage on that staging environment. So what happened is that like all the people that are working in that environment, they are impacted. So Anita, William, Alice, Chris, John, they no longer can access to that environment because that environment is just broken. So it results in like a loss of productivity. People, they are just like waiting that, and it was the case for me. So when something was broken, then you can just spend more time at the coffee machine and just taking a coffee with the colleagues. So it's a good time that you can spend, but it's not the most efficient way just to release and accelerate the velocity of your team. So that's the main issue of like the staging environment. And that's why we have seen like this emergence of like, hey, instead of having like one staging environment, can we just get like a multiple staging environment in some way? And that's the way that ephemeral environments came in. Okay. So the concept of ephemeral environments, and I can just quickly explain that, it's that basically you can spin up like a new environment that looks like, for instance, your staging or any other like environment. So you can just put whatever you want inside that environment, and you can spin up that environment like on demand. So whenever you need it, and then you can tear down that environment at any point of time. You can have as much as you want those environments. So meaning that in the case of Alice, Chris, Amita, Williams, that they are working on the same environment, it's no longer the case here because they can have like a new environment for each of them. Each features that they are working on, for instance, they can just spin up a new environment. This concept of ephemeral environment is part of a family of, and that's what I'm showing through the slide, it's part of a family of what we call environment as a service. Basically, the features and most of the players in that space that are like releasing and giving access to those features, the case for Qovery, we put that in the spectrum of like environment as a service. Environment as a service is basically the concept of like providing those environments. Now, those environments, they can be like long-term service. So long-term environments, they can run like forever. For instance, we have customer at Qovery that they're using environments as a service, but they are using long-term environment. For instance, they are doing like what we call single tenant environments. For each their customer, they can spin up an environment. And you have the concept also of ephemeral environment. Basically, you can clone a blueprint environment, so base environment that could be a production, staging, or whatever you want, and you can just spin up that environment the time that you need that environment and just tear down that environment at any point of time. Okay. So here in the case, so if we take again, like the example that we had just before, so in the case where Jason breaks that environment, so it's his own environment, like the testing environment, the features that he released, he breaks his environment, but it's only his environment that is now impacted, meaning that all the other environments from Alice, John, and Chris, they are not impacted. They can keep working and they can release their features confidently. So basically, Okay, so you no longer have like the issue of that staging environment that is shared. If something goes wrong, then everyone is impacted. Now it's no longer the case. And that's why we have like so many customers that are coming to us, and mostly companies that are growing. Because obviously when you have only just like a bunch of developers working on the same environment, let's say that you have less than 10 developers working on the same environment, the staging one, ephemeral environment is not really necessary because they can still coordinate, they can still communicate, they can still like keep doing the stuff. And even if it's broken, it's not broken for too much time, and it's not too many people that they are impacted. But in the case where companies that they are growing, they have like engineering teams that they are growing, we are seeing, and that's why they are pulling those companies and engineering managers, VP engineers coming to us, pulling environment as a service features for the ephemeral one, just to get the ability to spin up new environments like for their developers. Because when something like that happens, like an outage on their staging environment, it's dramatic because they have like the whole company, almost the whole company, that they no longer can just try out and release the new features that they are working on, basically. Okay. So I hope it's clear enough on that part. Just like feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I'm reading as much as I'm speaking. So just feel free like to interrupt me at any time. Okay. So what are like in terms of benefits, so there is many benefits and we'll cover that. But one of the main benefit, and it's really representative of like some companies that are coming to us, is like the ability to just basically wisely consume resources as well on your environment. So let's say like a long-term environment like the staging, so it's a static environment. This environment will be running all the time, all day long, meaning that from like for 24/7 during the whole year. In the case of ephemeral environment, you can just spin up the environment when you need it, and you can tear down that environment also when you no longer need it. So it's very cost effective, especially in the cloud where you have the resources. They are not free. They are not so expensive, but they are not free. And you need just to make also some optimization. It's the case today. For instance, I have the example of a company. So it's a pre-IPO company that came to us, and they are spending so many, like it's hundreds of, I can give like the exact number, but it's hundreds of thousands per month on their testing environment. And those environments, actually, they are like so complex that they can't just tear down those environments. They are looking for a solution just to create like those ephemeral environments. And in their case, what's interesting is that if they were like able just to set up like those ephemeral environments, then we make like a huge cost save on their cloud infrastructure. Because today they can't scale the number of static environments, because those static environments has a cost just to set up. So once they start to setting up those environments, they want to let them run like for a long time. Okay. But it's not even possible just to get like dozens of them, because it costs like so much money that it's not efficient at all. And that's why ephemeral environment in that case is like quite interesting and quite useful, because they can just simply spin up like those environments automatically, even if it takes time. And that was one of the question from someone like in the chat. But even if it takes time, at least they have like automated the whole process, and it can just take time to spin up. So they can use it like for a certain amount of time. They can also anticipate the fact that it takes time. But then once it's no longer like necessary using that environment, they can just drop that environment. You see, so it's a really powerful and it's really like a cost-effective features to use and to consider, especially when the infrastructure also is growing and the team is growing. Okay. Just like quickly, I want to cover like the concept of ephemeral environment. And most of the time, so I didn't mention that part, but when people think about ephemeral environment, most of the time, they think about like the ability to spin up an environment for every single pull request. It's true that it's really well associated, and it's one of the most common use case. Basically, so the concept is when you're working and you are like in a GitOps way of working, so you are applying like a Git flow, a certain Git flow, and you are creating like a new branch, like to create and work on a new feature. what happened is that we want to be able to try out that feature and test out that feature in isolations to make sure that this feature is working well before releasing it and just merging it back to the main branch. And this is where ephemeral environments on pull requests are like very quite useful, because basically, like in the concept of Qovery, for instance, the idea is that for every single pull request that you open up, you can get a fully dedicated environment and isolated environment where you will be able just to try out that feature. So here it's written in preview environment, but you can change it for like ephemeral environment, it works as well. You see, so the idea is that for that pull request, then you will get a full environment composed of the different services, backend, front-end, databases, load balancer, ingress, whatever you want, like even secrets, and they will be spin up. And once it's ready, then the user can get access to that environment that is completely isolated to try out the feature. Once the pull request is like tested and the preview environment has been tested, so everything goes well, then the developer would like to just probably just close the merge request or merge the pull request. And then what will happen is that basically this environment will disappear. So automatically, without even having to think about that, so the developer can just try out the feature confidently. The product manager and all the people that are associated to that feature, they can just try out that feature, and then the environment just automatically disappears. It's automatically cleaned up, and all the resources are just released from the cloud. Yes, of course. Yeah. Thank you, Walid. Yes, I will share the slides after with also like the YouTube link, so you can just get access to all of that. No problem. Thank you, Walid. All right. So that's what I'm going to focus on, this concept of ephemeral environments with the pull request. I will show you how you can duplicate environments as well, cloning environments. So it's really the concept of environment as a service, but really with the aspect of like a short time living for those environments. They are not long-term living environments. Okay. So just quickly, and before we get into jumping into the demo session, so the pros and the cons, just to summarize quickly. The pros, and that's one of the main selling points of the ephemeral environment, is like the ability to just scale as many as you want, like those environments, depending on the need. So it could be like to just run demo, to work on the specific features. So it could be like anything. So basically, we have customers that they are doing exactly like any kinds of use case. We have some of them that they're working just on the new features. So they release like a new environment for those features. We have people that they are like running demo environments for their sales team. So they have like a demo environment that is created every single time that they create, that they want to see a prospect, and just like let them playing also with that environment. So it's a valid use case. We have benchmark, also performance testing. We have those kind of use cases. At the end of the day, it's the same thing. It's basically the ability to spin up an environment and just tear down that environment at any time at any time. Just okay. So like saving money, as I mentioned. So the fact that just you are like spinning up and consuming resources, the time that you use like the environment is just naturally saving like tons of money, especially if you were running like static environments forever. And like the ability to really scale your team, because as I mentioned, as the first example, when you have a team, a bunch of developers working on the same environment, it's just normal that at some point it no longer works. Because if that environment is just broken by someone, then everyone is impacted. In that case, it's not the case, since everyone has their own environment. Okay. In terms of cons, it's really important just to mention that it's if you have a complex environment, like an environment that is big, really big, and that's why it's one of the main like a disadvantage of ephemeral environment. If you have like a big environment, for instance, we have this prospect that came to us with like hundreds of services. It's crazy, hundreds of services, databases. It was like just a nightmare. In that case, ephemeral environment are really bad at just like starting in a reasonable time. You see, so it takes a lot of time just to like spin up those environments, and this is where really when you start working with those ephemeral environments, you really need to think in terms of how can I just split my applications, even if you have like I don't know, dozens of services, hundreds of services, how I can just split my application in a different modules so that then from that I have maybe 10 to 20 like services that are working all together, and it's enough just to test and try out and work on a specific domain of that application. It's really important just considering that because it can help just to reduce the time to spin up those environments. I will show you all of that. And I will show you some aspect of Qovery that we implemented to just also optimize that time and make sure that those environments are like deployed in a reasonable time. Yes, yeah. One question from Walid will be nice if there. It's not really a question. If is it Ebenezer based on environment to speed up dependencies? Yes, that's something that I will show. Yeah, you have the ability to also stop. So that's a feature that you can find in a lot of environment as a service platform. Basically, the ability to hibernate, to stop like the stack, the technical stack, and then start again that technical stack. So you can release some resources, not all the resources, but then it can just help to speed up to speed up like the creation of that ephemeral environment. So yes, so yeah, something also to consider is that it's not so much. It's not. We have seen like a lot of companies like working and creating that ephemeral environment platform, so environment as a service platform. It's not so much complicated, but it starts to be like really challenging when you start managing. You need to properly manage secrets, environment variables. You need to spread those environment variables and secrets across the different environment. Then it start to be like a real mess. That's one of the most complex part. So that's something that I will just show how complex it can be. With platform like Qovery, it's like easy, but we have invested a lot of time just making it work like properly. That's very something complex that people just figure out once they get like starting building their own platform. Okay. So yeah, let's get started. So just quickly, because I'm gonna make like the demo with Qovery. So just quickly, Qovery is a product that I'm the CEO, so I'm totally biased. I'm going to say that's the best platform of the world. You can just try out yourself, but basically that's the platform that I will use just to make the demo of those ephemeral environments, just showing you what you can do and how does it change from like a static environment, and how it can be like well integrated into your environment. But basically, in the case of Qovery is a product that runs on top of your cloud account and Kubernetes, so you can install it like anywhere, and you can basically benefit from like those ephemeral environments like in less than 30 minutes. Basically, you can just get that all of that well integrated into your working environment, into Git, GitHub, so into your CI/CD, GitHub Actions, GitLab CI, Bitbucket, whatever. It works well and can be like really well integrated into your working environment. Okay, so let's get started. Let's jump into the demo and yes, any questions so far? Okay, let's go. And please don't forget to rate me 5 stars if you like the demo, obviously. All right. So I don't know how much of you are familiar with Qovery, but this is the Qovery web interface. Okay, here what you can see is basically I have already set up an environment that is named Blueprint environment. And inside this environment, I have 13 applications that are running, okay? Those applications, they are containerized applications, they are managed services, they are like Terraform script, Helm charts, I have cron jobs, lifecycle jobs. We have tons of different like applications working in the same environment. Really, the idea of environment is this ability to manage like from one place all the different applications that are working all together, okay? What I want to show you guys is first, so those applications, as I mentioned, so we have databases, we have Terraform script, really the idea of applications, so the service, what we call in a much more generic way, can be anything. Okay, so that's really the idea. Let's say you have a setup. So here in that case, I have an API gateway that is an Nginx one. I'm spinning up lambdas using, I don't remember the framework that I'm serverless. .com, yes, framework that I'm using for that one. We have a Terraform RDS instance that is spin up with Terraform. So everything, you can just like put all your different assets inside an environment. And then from that, you can start creating ephemeral environment. Okay, it's really important that blueprint environment will be the base environment that will be used to create like the different environment. Okay, so just to show you quickly, so as I mentioned here in the slide, so we are in the concept of environment as a service, okay? So the base thing is really that environment, so the blueprint environment. From that blueprint environment, I can duplicate that environment, so I can clone that environment into different environments. And I can also use the feature that is ephemeral environment based on the pull request, okay? So I will show you both, basically how you can clone an environment like very easily, and how you can get like those ephemeral environments linked to your pull request, okay? For the first, the clone environment, so let's say we have this blueprint environment, and let's say we have someone like a sales guy, so John from the sales team that wants to get access to an environment that looks like this blueprint, so that could be also the production or anything. You can just like click, in one click, you can clone that environment. So here you can just basically say, hey, I want to clone that blueprint environment, and let's say I want to name it John environment. So this environment is going to be for John. So I can select the cluster. I'm not going to detail all of that, but basically, so let's say it's a development. I can duplicate that environment in one click. And in one click, I've duplicated that environment. So you see, I have all the resources that have been duplicated. And I'm going to just to detail like the things that has been cloned. But basically, I can spin up and start that environment. And this environment is going to be completely isolated and dedicated to John, for instance. So I can share the URLs. And for each services that are created inside that environment, and the services that are exposed outside, you get dedicated URLs to get access to those environments, okay? So here, what happened is that we have all the scripts and all the applications that are going to be deployed. You see, so for instance, my Terraform RDS script is like a build. So it's a Docker image containing my Terraform manifest. And that application will be executed, and all the Terraform like template will be like executed, and we get our RDS instance. Okay, so in terms of a clone, when you clone, and that's really important because in the concept of environment as a service, what makes the environment as a service and ephemeral environments complex is really the ability to clone all the resources in a smart way. And when I'm talking about like the smart way, I'm talking about the environment variable, for instance. Environment variables, so it's in the case of Qovery, we are using environment variables and built-in environment variables to make sure that the applications can connect to each other and get access to the information that are necessary just to connect to each other. Okay. In that concept, it means that when you clone an environment, you need to clone also like the dependencies, so the different environment variables in a smart way, because they are no longer corresponding. The key itself still is the same, but the value itself has changed, and you need to change and swap like all those elements from one environment to the other, but keep all the link between the environment variable. For instance, here in that case, we have the Postgres database URL internal with the database underscore URL alias. If we look at the value here, we can't get the value because it's a secret. This value will be different from the other environment because that environment, the other environment, has completely changed, even if the logical link are still the same. So for John Env, if we go back to that environment, so I've switched to that environment, we can see that in the backend environment here, we have still the link, but actually the value that is under the hood So here we can see for the backend, the host internal, the value that is available here is completely different from the other environment. So see, so all the different elements that are cloned and they are really related to the environment itself are cloned, but they are cloned in a smart way. Okay, so you don't even have to think about that, but I just wanted to cover that aspect. But basically, if you need to clone an environment, you see, so that environment, the John environment that is created and deployed now, okay, so it's almost done. We have the Redis instance that is running. We have the Postgres instance that is running. We have a SQS service that is spin up. We have the Terraform EaaS, and we have a pipeline system. So all the different services will be starting in the right order, just to make sure that everything is working properly. But at the end of the day, then at the end, it will work perfectly well. Okay. So if I want to clone and create another environment from that one, let's say it's a Chris environment now, I can just clone that environment also in one click and boom. You see? So you can create as many as you want environments. If I want to duplicate and create like 100 environments, I can create those environments. And the resource that they are allocated dynamically. Okay, it's when you deploy the environment that the resources under the hood are allocated. Okay, so when you delete the environment, and that's the beauty, then the resources are just released. Okay, so you no longer pay for those resources. All right. So this is the clone environment. You can automate. We have customers that they are automating that part, so creating environments that are living like for a certain amount of time, and so on and so forth. Something that is also quite interesting, just in terms of feature, I'm going to show you, is like the ability to just start and stop automatically those environments. Let's say you have an environment that might like run longer than what you did expect. You can just set like specific rules to say, hey, I want to turn that environment in like a certain amount of time, or I want to turn down that environment every single day from the week. And I want to stop that at 8, could be PM, AM. So here in that case, it's PM. And I want to start again that environment every single day at 7 AM. So you can even like anticipate, so you can just tear down those environments like when they're not used, and just spin up those environments when you need those environments, you see? So additionally, so it means that even in the case where you have environments that are running like for a certain amount of time, you can even like set what we call those rules, deployment rules, just to make sure that you consume less, right? Okay. So that's the case. So that's the clone environment so that you can use. Now, what I'm going to show is the ability to create what we call preview, so ephemeral environments on the pull request. And basically, so that's the second point. So from the slides, so if I go here, that's this one. So basically, the idea I'm going to show you, the idea is that when I'm going to pick like one of my applications that are inside the Blueprint environment, and what I will do is that I will create a pull request. So for one of them, I will change just something, and we'll see what happens, okay, when we create a pull request. Okay, so that's the idea. The idea is that to get a preview environment, an ephemeral environment, just for that pull request, so we can try out the feature. Okay, and then when we close or we just like merge that feature, so that branch, we want to see that environment just like being teared down. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so first, to get that, you just need to get into the Blueprint environment, so your base environment, and say that, hey, I want to use that environment as being like my base environment. I want to turn on preview environment feature. Okay, so here it's already the case. You can just click on the settings, preview environments, turn on preview environments. And here we have a second option. We have the create on demand option. Okay, so if you turn off that feature, the create on demand option, basically for every single pull request that you do create, you will get an ephemeral environment that will be associated. Okay, it's not super cost effective, but at least it helps just the developers to get by default a new environment that will be spin up, and from the pull request they will receive the URLs to try out that feature. But It's much more efficient in terms of cost just to spin up and you will see the integration. But from your pull request directly, with that feature turned on, you get a message from Qovery saying, hey, if you want to spin up a new environment, just type that command. That's what will happen. I'm going to show you just right now. So let's pick my core backend application. This application basically is running, okay, it's a hello DMP. So that's the that's the page of that application, okay? It's running perfect. It's a blueprint environment. The blueprint environment doesn't need to be running, and by the way. You can just tear down that environment when it's no longer necessary. You have made like all your tests. You can just stop that environment without deleting it. Then all the resources will be released. But here, in that case, what I want is basically, I want to change that title, like Hello DMP to something else, like Hello LinkedIn, for instance. Okay. So for that, what I'm going to do is basically just getting into my my repository. Okay. So maybe what I'm going to do is, and changing the code basically, okay, and creating a new pull request. So I need to find just where, I don't remember where the code is for that one. Base HTML probably. Is it the main branch? It's main branch. Maybe it's not the, that's why maybe. Oh, yes, it's not the latest one, so that's why. Update based HTML. Okay, I can just like push the, oh, we don't really care. I'm going to change just the title here. Short me, run, shortener. Okay, it's not this one probably. I don't even remember why is the. If you know where the code is, just let me know. Template, is it template by the way or static? That's the real question. Oh, it should be its template. I don't remember. Well, anyway, we can. We don't even need to, and I wonder if it's not short me URL. Short me is a free tool. Yes, that's this one actually. Just check quickly. I'm going to check. Sorry for that. Yes, that's this one actually. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's edit this one. Okay. So let's say here instead of shortening URL shortener, so it's hello LinkedIn. So I'm changing just the title, and basically here I'm going not to commit directly to the main branch, but creating a new branch for that one. So it's a LinkedIn event change title. So that's the name of my branch, and update. I don't even need description. We don't care. And here I'm going to create a pull request. Okay. So basic, really basic in that case. Hey, this is a new pull request. This is a new PR. Okay. So here, I'm going to create the pull request now. And what will happen is exactly what I mentioned. You see, whoa, we have a new message from Qovery. You see? So by creating this pull request, we have Qovery that has posted a new message here, indicating, saying that if you want to trigger, like in create a new environment for that pull request, then you can just specify the environments that you want to use as a base environment. Okay, so I can use my blueprint, but even like any of them. Okay, and just type and copy the command here. And from that command, I can just basically deploy a new environment. So I'm going to show you that first. I'm going back. I didn't publish that comment, but I want to go back here. And what you see is that we have our blueprint environment, Chris, and John environment. We have 3 environments. When I will publish that comment, what will happen is that basically I will have like a 4th environment. Okay, fingers crossed. We don't really know. It's always a demo. And what will happen is that Qovery preview of. I'm just expecting to get a message or something. If I don't receive a message, sometimes it takes some time because of the webhook. So I just hope that the webhook has been triggered, because GitHub what happened is that GitHub sent like a webhook. So when you're making an action, so Qovery has hooked the repository, and then we receive a webhook from GitHub, and sometimes it takes some time. So here in that case, it didn't work yet, but I'm pretty sure it will work like in just a few seconds, right? But the idea here is that when you execute that command, so the environment is created for that, and what will happen is that directly from the pull request itself, you receive a message saying that, hey, your environment is created, is in progress. You can follow and get like the URLs from like the different services, and you can get access basically to the services that you have spin up. You see, so it's really like the same. So yeah, if it takes time, it just takes time. Sometimes it takes time with GitHub. It really depends. I hope that they didn't make any outage on their API. It happens during this time on GitHub. Okay, but that's basically the idea. So you get a new environment, you can try out that environment, and everything goes well. So it can take time. It really depends of the number of services that you have to spin up, and then from that, once you're good, you can just close the pull request or just merge the pull request because it's something that has been validated by your team, and then the environment just basically disappears. Okay. That's the way it works. Something that I wanted just to quickly covering here is the time that it takes. That was one of the questions. The time that it takes to spin up a resources. So with Qovery, you have the ability to first to specify the order of executions. Like you can create a pipeline. Inside this pipeline, you can declare some stages, and inside the staging. So if you're familiar with GitHub Actions or GitLab CI, it's a bit similar. So basically, you have the dependencies of the different services that you want to spin up. So let's say that you have first the database that you want to create. Then you can create a stage where you put all your database. So here it's the case. We have SQS, Postgres one, Terraform RDS, and Redis one. Then we have a stage where we have one step that is seeding the database. Okay, so for that test, and it's a very common question, is how do you seed and how do we seed the database when the new environment has been created? You can put your own script. We have even created a tool that is named Replibyte that you can use to create and initiate the database that you will use for your testing purpose. Okay, so that script can be set once the database has been created. So it will be executed and will just like initialize all of that. Then you can spin up the different services. In my case, it's like 4 different services with a cron, backend, lambdas, and so on and so forth, gateway, frontend, and so on and so forth. Here, what you can see if you look at the logs, actually all the stages, they are like deployed in parallel. So not all the stages, but all the steps inside a stage have been deployed like in parallel. They are deployed in parallel. So if you look at the services, so here we are at the end. So we have all, you can see that they are green here, they are green here, then green here, and here we are deploying those ones. You see the front end, the database, and the dashboard here, they are deployed in parallel. So that's the way we can optimize like the time that it takes to spin up resources. The more services you put inside the same stage, and the better it is just to streamline and optimize like the deployment time. But obviously there is no magic here. Let's say you spin up a resource that is external to Qovery, because at the end, it's running on your cloud account. You can spin up any kind of resources. But if you spin up a Terraform RDS instance here, you see, for instance, it took like 5 minutes. You see, it took like 5 minutes to be deployed, like almost 5 minutes. Those 5 minutes, they are incompressible. Actually, we can't do anything here because it's the time that it takes to provision from the cloud provider. So here, in that case, it's AWS to spin up that resource. Okay, there is some options that you can use just to speed up that process, but at the end of the day, you are still dependent on the external services and the services that you spin up. So if they are not optimized, if they take time, they will just take time. Okay. Something that we are seeing is like the front-end applications, back-end applications. Sometimes it's also like some optimization that must be done, especially on Docker, just to make sure that the cache is well used. Those are optimizations that you can do just to optimize like the deployment time, really. Okay. And one aspect that I mentioned is like the idea of if you have a bunch of hundreds of services like this prospect that came to us and they want to get like ephemeral environments, just to limit the time that it takes, it's better to split that number of services into domain, like application domain specific, just to make sure that you have just a bunch of applications that are working all together that you can put inside an environment. Then it will reduce drastically the time that it takes to spin up like that environment. Okay. Okay. All right. So yes. So that environment is like ready. I'm going to delete that one. We don't care. Okay, Chris, that one is like deployed. And you see my gen environment is like you created and now it's running. So that environment is running perfectly well. All the services has been spin up. It took some time, okay, just to be spin up like a bit more like than 10 minutes. But all the services that are inside, they are running in a complete like isolated way. And we can just try out the feature that we are working on that one. If we need, so those resources, they are like working, so I can just get access to the core backend here. Okay, so the core backend, it's still like hello DMP, but I can deploy like a new version of that one if I want. I can even change the branch. I can do whatever I want. So, okay, so you have access to everything. And that environment will not impact the other one that is the blueprint environment, you see? So that's really like the beauty of those environments. And once it's done, then you can just drop that environment basically. All right. Okay, good. Here we are. So let's go back to the slide. That's that one I'm looking for. Okay. So yeah, it's the end of the demo, but happy to make like a much more like a detailed demo if you have any specific points that you want to cover. I know that it was fast. There is so many things that we can cover, but I don't want to run out of time. I just want to make sure that we wrap up the right way. So as I mentioned, like just to summarize, like ephemeral environments, preview environments, dynamic environments, whatever environments that you're seeing, like you have even deployed preview in review apps like for HeroQ, for Vercel, for Netlify, they are all the same at the end of the day. It's the concept of creating a dynamic environment when it's needed and releasing that environment to when it's no longer needed. Then from that, you pay less. You can try out the features that you are working on or do whatever you need to do like in an isolated way without impacting the other environments, okay? That's really important. In ephemeral environment can really help just to reduce like environment costs, especially when you have like long running environments that they are like running tons of different services that they are not even used. Basically, you can just split up that into like domain specific environments. You can just spin up those environments where they are necessary. So it's like a good win to consider, even if, as I mentioned, like it can be a bit challenging just to set up like an ephemeral environment. It requires like some setup, something that I didn't mention, for instance, in the case of Terraform. So if you have like some Terraform script and you want to make sure that you spin up like the right way, you need to prefix the resources that you are going to spin up. Otherwise, you will get like some overlap and it will not work between the different environments. So those things, they are like to consider. It's a cost in terms of implementation, but it's not so much drastic. You can do it in a very easy way. It just requires some effort, obviously. Okay. So, all right. It's over for that session. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed. You learned some stuff about the ephemeral environment. Now it's much more clear for you. If you have any questions, we have like a few more minutes. Happy to respond to those questions. So yes, thank you. All right. So thank you, Dimitri. Yeah, thank you, guys. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So if you have any questions, you have my email address, but you can also just like ask your questions, like in comment. I can just respond afterwards. There is no problem, but just feel free to ping me if you have any questions about ephemeral environments, static environments. I'll be super happy just to connect. Have a great day, have a great time, and enjoy the vacation if you are like in vacation. Bye.